Maybe you'd like to start hand knitting, but don't know where to start. In this video, I'm going to show you how to start hand knitting, and therefore you can start your own projects and have fun along the way. I'm going to be showing you cable cast on knitting English style, and I am right-handed, just for the demonstration so we know. To get started, we need to make a slip knot, very simply done by simply wrapping the yarn around the tip of your finger and that loop there, passing the length of yarn through it to create a knot. We'll leave this tail here. Generally this tail is useful for stitching up your work, or you can sew it into your work once you've finished. Take one needle, pop it through the slip knot and tighten that up. Not too tight because we want to be able to stick a needle in now. So get the other needle. We've got one stitch, hurrah, that's done already. Now to create the second stitch, we simply go from left to right, popping the needle through, left to right, and then cross the needle so this right hand needle is at the back. Take the yarn, wrap it around the back of the needle and through the centre of them, and then I use my index finger on my left hand for this, just to sort of gently push the tip of that needle. And here we can see where that yarn has been passed around the back and through the centre. That's the yarn there. So pull that forward and now pop that onto the left hand needle. That is stitch number 2. You can continue in the exact same way, going left to right with the stitch round the back to create another stitch. But I do find to get a nice neat edge, it looks nicer if you go in between the stitches. So you can see there's stitch 2 there and stitch 3 here, and there's the 2 legs of this stitch. If we go in between with the needle down the line, it makes a nicer edge. So we're going through, wrap the yarn around the back, through the centre, and again just gently tap that needle point there to collect this stitch that's here, and then pop that onto the left hand needle. So we'll do that again nice and slowly. So there's the 2 legs of that last stitch in between with the needle. Cross it so the right hand needle's at the back, left hand needle's at the front. Then we take the yarn around the back of everything, through the centre of that cross, and then we'll gradually collect that yarn that we've just wrapped around, and that's the next stitch. Pop it on the left hand needle. Before you pull that stitch tight, this is a good time to stick your needle in between. So there's the 2 legs of that stitch. Pop the needle in between, yarn around the back, through the centre, collect that stitch, pop it on the needle. Through the centre of the stitches, the right hand needles at the back, the left hand needles at the front, yarn around the back, through the centre, collect that stitch. So if I just keep doing this, you can see a few stitches being created. And obviously in time you get quicker and quicker at doing this. I'm going slow to help you learn. So we've got quite a few stitches on here now. So for demonstration purposes, we've got some there. Can you see here, that's quite a nice neat edge, whereas the start's a bit loopy and not quite as nice. That's going in between the stitches. That's how that creates that nice neat edge. To do a first row of knitting, see I'm gently teasing this so I can get my needle in. The first stitch, we want to put the right hand needle left to right, and we're not going through both legs now. I'm not doing that at all. We're just going to go through the front leg of that stitch, and it's the same action as we were just doing. So the yarn goes around the back of everything, through the centre, and we collect that stitch. Now then, what we do different this time, we're going to leave this stitch on the right hand needle, and the stitch that's on the left hand needle, we're just going to pop him off there. So there we go. We've now got one stitch on the right hand needle. So we're going to work this next stitch now on the left hand needle. So same thing, left to right, just the front leg. The yarn goes around the back, through the centre, collect this stitch, and off it goes onto the right hand needle. Stitch 3, left to right, through the centre there. Right hand needle at the back, the yarn goes around the back, through the centre. When I collect that stitch onto the right hand needle, drop it off. Left to right, the yarn goes around the back, through the centre, collect that stitch, and we finish with the stitch on the left hand needle now, so we can drop off there. Left to right, round the back, through the centre, collect that stitch, and that's how we work across the row. Okay, so that is row 1. And then to do row 2, we need to turn it so that these stitches are now the left needle, so they go over there, and now this needle becomes the right needle, and it's the same procedure. So to do the next row, we get the needle and we go left to right through the front leg of this stitch. So the needles are crossed again, right hand needle at the back. Take the yarn round the back, through the centre, collect that stitch, drop it off the left hand needle because now it's moved onto the right hand needle. Through left to right, round the back through the centre, collect that stitch, drop it off the left hand needle onto the right hand needle. There we go. And this way we're doing row 2. When you're doing knit stitches, you're creating lots of loops, and I just want to show you, we've just created row 2 here, and there's the loops there, and row 1, these are the loops there. So same thing again, to do row 3, we want to make this needle now the left hand needle, swap the needles around, and we'll do the exact same thing again. So we're going through the stitches left to right, just through the front leg, round the back through the centre, take that stitch, drop this one on the left hand needle. We've finished with that now because it's going onto the right hand needle, and we'll work our way across. And what we're also doing now is creating another row of loops. So let me show you. So I've just done row 3, which is this row of loops. Row 2 is on this side, and row 3 is here. So that's how you can count your rows. So 1, 2, 3. But obviously, as you've got more work, you just count in between 1, 2, 3, 4. Have you learned how to cast on knitting stitches and you've mastered the knit stitch? Maybe now you'd like to learn how to purl stitch also. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the purl stitch and therefore also complete stocking stitch, sometimes known as stockinette stitch. I'm going to show you how to do purl stitch. It's quite similar to knit stitch, they're not too dissimilar, but purl is going at the front of the needles instead of the backs. So the right hand needle goes to the front of the stitch, right to left, and the needle, the right hand needle, goes at the front of the work, not the back of the work. So through right to left, needle at the front, crossing the needles again as we do with knit stitch, and then the yarn goes through the cross of the needles and to the front, and we collect the stitch. So right to left, right hand needle at the front, the yarn goes through the centre of those needles there, and the yarn comes to the front, and that's how the stitch is created, by wrapping around the needle. And I always use my thumb to just gently push that needle, and we can collect the stitch, and we've worked the stitch on the left hand needle. Now that can drop off, it's now safe and secure on the right hand needle. So the needle goes right to left through just the front, the yarn goes through the centre to the front, and we collect that stitch. Right to left, yarn goes around the needle like so and off. Through the centre to the front, collect the needle, drop that one off. And that is how we do purl stitching. So I'll just continue doing these few for you. Right to left, through the centre of the needles, to the front, collect the stitch. Right to left, through the centre of the needles, to the front, collect the stitch. Right to left, through the centre of the needles, to the front, collect the stitch. Now I'll move this to the left hand side, which is what we always do because I want to work the next row. You can see here the fabric that's being created has got quite a smooth finish to it. At the start here was when I was doing some knit rows, and it was just knit, knit, knit every row. And this bit here is called stocking stitch or stockinette stitch. And to create this, we need to do one knit row, one purl row, one knit row, one purl row. And you can see the back, it's got the loopy finish to it, but smaller loops than if you're doing just knit, knit, knit rows. And the front has got these V shapes. So if we're doing stockinette, stocking stitch, the next row needs to be a knit row. So I'll do a knit row again, like so. I'm doing it a bit quicker because I'm going to be showing the purl stitches again. So I've got to the end. So yeah, again, this needle now needs to go on the left. Swap those over. So purling again. We need to go right to left. The yarn goes through the centre of the needles and collect the stitch. Through the centre to the front, collect the stitch. You'll see stockinette stitch, stocking stitch on quite a lot of knitted garments. It does give a nice finish. And sometimes you'll want to count your rows. And if you're not used to doing that, it might sound a bit daunting, but let me show you. So here's the stocking stitch. You can see lots of different V shapes here. Each one of those V's is one stitch. So if you want to count these rows, we'll start with the first V next to the needle. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 rows. And that's a simple way to count them. You might find it useful to be counting rows if you've knit a piece of work and you're knitting another piece of work and you want to make sure it's the same size. Then you can count your rows that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to be showing you a tutorial on how to do rib stitch. Ribbing 1 by 1 rib. Your knitting pattern will probably say knit 1, purl 1, repeat until the end or something like that. So to start we need to knit 1 stitch. And then we need to bring the yarn to the front of the work because purling we always work at the front. So we'll purl 1 stitch. And knit, the yarn always is at the back, so we need to move the yarn across. And we'll knit 1 stitch. Bring the yarn to the front again to do the next stitch, which is a purl. Yarn to the back to do a knit 1, yarn to the front to do a purl 1, yarn to the back. And we work across the row, working knit 1 stitch, purl 1 stitch, but always remembering to bring the yarn to the correct side, front or back, for which stitch we are completing. So we've got our last knit 1, purl 1 on this row. And then we always have to move the work over to the left hand side, so that's now on the left. And we can see here, it's a bit loopy, but we can see knit and purl stitches. If I do another row, this would be helpful to show you again. I've got an even number of stitches on here, so I'll be starting with a knit row again. There's a knit and there's the purl loop, a knit and there's the purl loop. So do a knit 1, yarn to the front, to work the purl stitch. Yarn to the back to knit the knit stitch. Yarn front for purl, yarn back for knit. Front, purl, back, knit. And that's how you do knit one, purl one, or 1 times 1 rib. So you can just see the start of the ribbing there. Here's the knit stitches, and here's the purl loops, knit stitches, purl loops across the row. So here I've worked a little bit more of the 1 by 1 rib. So you can see there are knit stitches, purl stitches, knit stitches, purl stitches, and there's a bit of stretch in this work, but when it's all pushed together you can only really see the knit stitches. Now I can show you how to do 2 times 2 rib, which is knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and so on and so forth. So we'll start by doing our knit 2 stitches, and then we need to purl, so the yarn comes to the front to do the purl stitches, 2 of those, and then we move the yarn to the back to work 2 knit stitches. The yarn is always at the front with a purl, purl 2, and the yarn is always at the back to work knit stitches. So we can continue with our 2 of each stitch to complete this row. I have got an even number of stitches on here to make life a bit easier, but generally you would have an even number for knit 2, purl 2 rib. Do the purl 2. If I bring that to the other side, we can work another row. So this isn't too complicated. We can just see here 2 knit stitches, and there's 2 purl loops there, 2 knit stitches, 2 purl loops. That will look a bit easier on the next row. So I can see it's a knit to start. So 2 knit, 2 purl. And every time I am sweeping this yarn to the correct place to work the stitches. So purl is always at the front, knit stitches, the yarn is always at the back. Purl, bring the yarn to the front, do 2 purl stitches, yarn at the back to do 2 knit stitches. I've worked a little bit more of the rib stitch in here, the 2 by 2 rib, so you can see a bit more of the work completed. You'll notice that the knit stitches are a bit more prominent than the purl stitches, but this does create quite a stretchy piece of work, piece of fabric that you've worked there. So to cast off knitting, we need to first do 2 knit stitches as we normally do. So I shall do 1 knit stitch and then another knit stitch. And what we do to cast off is we take the point of the left needle and we scoop up this first stitch here, and we pull everything to the end of the right needle and just pop that stitch over the top, and that stitch there is safe and not going to unravel. So we continue the same. We make another knit stitch, so we've got 2 on the right hand needle, and then we take the left needle point to scoop that needle on the right hand side and bring it over the needle. That's a second stitch cast off, and we continue doing that right across the way. So you always need to have 2 stitches on the right hand needle to then scoop up the furthest away one and pop it over the end of the needle. And this is the simplest way to cast off and a really easy way for beginners to learn. So knit a stitch till there's 2 on the right hand needle, scoop that stitch and pop it over the edge. I'll just go right to the end, and then you can see what we're doing. Scoop that stitch over the end, always 2 on the right hand needle, scoop the stitch over the end, and you get to the last stitch and do the same thing. So you've got 2 stitches, and then you take this stitch over. Now you're left with 1 stitch. I'll pop this needle down now, I've done with that. And what I always do is just stick my finger in to make sure it's nice and safe. Get some snips or scissors, cut the end, and then tie that into a knot. Just literally loop this yarn through and tie the knot like so. And that way you've got a nice neat edge across the top, and it's not too tight. Hopefully you've not pulled your stitches too tight, and that's a nice neat way to complete your cast off, or sometimes known as bind off. Maybe you've done some knitting and you've gone wrong. Oh no, how do I sort this out? You might need to undo some stitches. So I've got a little bit of completed work here with knitting and purl stitches. That's a great example to show you how to unpick your work. First of all, I need to turn the needle over so that the work that I want to unpick, undo, tink, whichever way you say is on the right hand side. I take hold of the yarn and I hold it with a bit of tension just to make life a bit easier. One of my other tutorials, I show you how to hold the yarn and needle in such a way. Now then, can you see the loop here? That's the stitch below the stitch that's on the needle. This is what I've just worked, and this underneath is the stitch from the previous row. And to undo this row that I've done, if I stick my left hand needle through that hole there, that is the stitch below, and I just bring this to the end of the right hand needle, I can drop that off and the yarn comes away with it. So I've just undone 1 stitch and it's now safe on the left hand needle. So I can do the same again. So I'll go to the stitch underneath and I can see the loop there of that stitch, bring the stitch to the end of the right hand needle, drop that off, and the yarn will come away from that stitch. So that's 2 purl stitches I've just undone. And now I can see these are knit stitches, and it's a little bit easier to bring the yarn to the back as when you're working a knit stitch. So if I go underneath, I can see the stitch there, the loop. If I stick my needle into that loop, I can pull that stitch off. Again, it's quite prominent there. Pull the stitch off and I've saved it, and all these stitches are now safe on the left hand needle. I've got a purl stitch here. So I'll come to the front. If I just pull this yarn, you can see it's creating a bit more of a hole here that makes life a bit easier for me to see this stitch underneath. So I can have the stitch safe on my left hand needle, pull the one I want to undo on the right hand needle off and take that yarn away. And here, because I've got a bit of tension on this yarn, I can see that stitch underneath quite easily. I can go there. Again, I've got knit stitches, so it's easier to have the yarn at the right side, therefore at the back. Pull a bit of tension, not too tight, but just a little bit, and I can see this stitch here underneath. So I'll stick my needle in, pop that stitch off. And this is how I will go across to undo this row of stitches. Sometimes you just need, you've maybe worked a bit too much, or you've made a mistake, and this is a nice simple way to undo your stitches but still keep control of what work you've got left on the needles. So I'll go right across to the end just so you can see this being done on the last stitch. So I just pull it and there's just fish around and there's that stitch underneath. And the last one always looks a bit more confusing, but I can see that stitch there. So I'll stick my needle in and drop that off. So there I've undone 1 complete row, but all my work is safe. all the stitches are on there. If you really have gone wrong and you want to undo your work and save the yarn to use for something else or to start again, you just take all the stitches off the needle. It's okay. And you can just unravel all that work. But you can see here how the knitting and purl stitches have gone to the front and the back of the work. And that's another way where you can unravel your knitting. Maybe you've gone really wrong. And there we are, all undone. Counting stitches when you're knitting, and then somebody talks to you and you go, where was I? What number? Oh, start again. I've discovered a way of counting stitches that's a bit quicker and simpler, and it's something I do all the time now. A quick way of counting my stitches is if I can visually see 3 stitches and 2 stitches quite easily. So when I'm counting stitches now, I'll literally pull 3 stitches together, 2 stitches together, and I shall count my stitches like this. So I shall go 5, 10, 15, and so on. And it's just a quicker way of counting stitches. I really hope that helps you too. Would you like to learn how to sew 2 pieces of your knitting together, but with a really neat seam that you can't really see the seam from the right side? I can show you how to do that today. When I start my knitting, I always like to leave a bit of a tail that's going to be enough to use to help me stitch up the seam. This packet's quite old and been very well used, but knitter's needles are very useful to use if you've got them. There's 2 sizes in this packet, but the idea is that it's quite a blunt point. It's not going to damage the yarn as we're stitching it, and the eye of the needle is quite large to accommodate the yarn. When we're threading needles, people very often do it like this, but with knitting yarn, it's easier to pinch the yarn like so and then press the eye of the needle through it. That's an easier way to thread the needle. I'm going to be showing you ladder stitch, and what we'll generally do with ladder stitch is we'll stitch 1 stitch worth in from the edge. And I just would like to show you, I've got my ribbing stitch here. If I pull this apart a little bit, can you see these stitches here on the side? Little loops. They're the stitches that I want to use when I'm sewing up my ladder stitch. And on the other side, you can see them here as well. Instead of starting straight away on the next piece, I find it creates a little lump. So I'm going to go up here on the same piece of knitting, and it'll bring that knot just hidden away. And now I can go to my other piece of knitting. Here's my cast on stitches. You can see the loops there. If I go to the very last one and put my needle through that and draw it through, and now I want to go underneath again on this side, again trying to disguise that knot that I've got there. So go up, and now I'm going to be looking for these loops on the opposite side. So there's one. I shall go under, and there's one on this side, underneath, and we'll gradually go side to side, picking up 1 loop from each side. And this stitch is called ladder stitch because, if you can see, we're creating a ladder in effect here. Let's do a few. There we go. And what we can do now is gradually pull on those ladder strands, if you will. And that's created the seam. And we can see this row of ribbing is kind of melted into the other side. So let's start again. Under one stitch there, under one stitch here, and so on. It's quite a slow process. Some people hate sewing up their knitting work and put off sewing, but I quite like the process of hand sewing my knitting together. Yes, it takes a bit of time, but it's taken a lot of time to knit all this, so why not take the time to stitch it up nicely as well? And then I can gently pull on these stitches and you can see it all gathering up together there, and that's created a seam that's quite invisible, I hope. And on the rear side there is a little bit of a lump, but there has to be somewhere for those stitches to go, but at least they're not showing on the right side. I've completed the ribbing section of my pullover that I'm working on, and hopefully you agree that that's quite a nice neat seam there. And now I need to work on the lacy part and stitch that together. It's the same process, one stitch at a time. And then I'll gradually work my way up, and every now and then just pull on that thread to tighten up the ladder stitch, creating the nice neat seam. Let's pull on this now and see that all come together. I've also got a pattern going on here, and I'm just visualizing that the stripes are matching up okay, because when I knitted one side and the other side I counted to make sure I've done the same amount of pattern repeats until I got to the armholes here. I've reached a part of my knitting where I've joined in a new piece of yarn. I generally do a little slip knot, a little tiny one, to hold them in place while I'm knitting, so I can undo that. And because the piece of yarn that I started with has now been used, I'm going to use one of these to stitch the rest of the seam. But what I shall do is do a couple of stitches there, and I'll pop my needle through to the rear of the work, turn my work over. Now to stitch this end in, I'll simply use the bulk of the seam that's on the back to do a few stitches. I'll weave the end through the stitches, something like this, to hold those in place. I've got two pieces of yarn. I'll stitch with one, and then when I've finished I'll sew the other one in, going upwards after the seam has been worked, just simply to reduce the amount of bulk on the same place, spread it out a little bit. So these two ends, I'll find out which is the longest one, but they both seem to be very similar in length, these. Select one, thread the needle again. I'll tuck this one round the back, pointing downwards, so it doesn't get in the way. And then I can start stitching up again. Just the same as I was doing before. One stitch at a time, enjoying the process to give a nice neat seam. And to the untrained eye, the people who don't knit, they won't even know there's a seam there. Are you now comfortable knitting English throwing style, but would like to learn how to knit a bit quicker? I've been knitting English style throwing style since I was a little girl. My nana and my mum both taught me how to knit, and when I first started I would have been like most people who begin knitting, holding the needles something like this, and then to do a knit stitch I'd put the needle in the stitch, I'd grab the yarn, wrap it around and collect my stitch, and I'd work like this, dropping the right hand needle so that I could wrap the yarn around and knit, dropping the needle. Now lots of people knit like this, and that's absolutely fine. There's lots of different techniques, but my nana used to knit the way I'm going to show you, and so does my mum now. And it's just a way of where you're holding the right hand needle, whichever way works for you, but you never let go of it. And it just means you can be a little bit more slick with your knitting. But to aid this, we need to have a little bit of tension on the yarn that we're holding. And it's a good idea to have tension on the yarn, because the fabric that you're creating will look a lot neater, because your stitches will be more uniform. So there's different ways of creating tension. I remember my nana used to like to wrap the yarn around her middle finger and have the yarn here around her index finger. I've seen people wrap the yarn around their hand and have the yarn here. But for me, I like to hold the yarn around my little finger and have the yarn over my index finger. Have a play, see which works and is most comfortable for you. But you'll notice I've just automatically rested the right hand needle across my thumb. I've seen people do this and they hold the needle like this and they'll knit and they won't let go of the needle. That feels awkward to me. How I do it and how my nana and my mum taught me was to hold the needle across my thumb, and then this just slides, the hand slides up and down the needle. But you can see I've got the yarn here that's got a little bit of tension, but I can throw it around the needles. So to do the knit stitch, in the stitch there, left to right, and then without this needle leaving my hand, I'll just slide forward and wrap the yarn around the front to take the needle. So do that again. To work the stitch, my hand slides across the right hand needle and my index finger throws that yarn, if you will, around. I always end up using this finger to push the needle and collect the stitch, sliding forward to make the stitch. And this way, it's not as cumbersome and everything flapping around as much. It's a little bit neater. Now then, that's doing knit stitches. When we're doing purl stitches, I'll just move the needle over because that needs to be on this side now. It's the same thing. So I'll take my yarn across my little finger and the yarn across my index finger. But to start with, I need to get the needle from the right to left. Here we are, tuck the needle in. Now I'll collect the yarn. And it's the same thing. This right hand needle is just sliding across my right hand while I do the stitches. And my index finger on the right hand is just moving the yarn around to create the stitch. So hopefully you can see that the right hand needle is never losing contact with my right hand. My right hand is constantly supporting it, like so. So I'll go back to doing knitting because I'm doing stocking stitch or stockinette stitch at the moment. Right, so I like to use my right little finger and across my index finger. Now then, what I'll do is I'll speed up a little bit. So this is my normal knitting speed. It's a lot quicker. I haven't sped up the video. This is me doing my knitting stitches as I do when I'm sat on my sofa nice and comfortable. So hopefully that helps you, and you can see that that's a speedier way to do English knitting. If ever you have undone some yarn and you need to roll it back onto the ball, the top tip my nana gave me, and it makes logical sense to me, is to put some fingers over the ball. You might only have a small ball of yarn, so just wrap one finger, but I'll show you what I mean. So I've got this big ball of yarn here. I'm going to have a few fingers on the ball, and as I wrap the yarn around, I'm going to wrap the yarn over my fingers. And this way, when I release my fingers, the yarn won't be too tight around the ball. So you can imagine on a smaller ball of yarn, because this is a full big ball, you might only put one finger. It depends on the size of the ball that you're winding up. If I wind up this yarn now, so there's a bit of tension because my fingers are there, but when I release my fingers, the yarn is held in place, but this yarn isn't stretched. And you don't want to stretch the yarn, because one day you might want to knit this again, and then it's not too tight, and it'll be keeping nice for you for next time.